So at the top of 9.6, this whole first page is review. You took the test yesterday. Your next test is still over trigonometry. We're going to finish the chapter, which means slightly different things for honors. So today is a lot of what we've already learned, and then like one new thing. So we're going to find all trig ratios from angle K. We're going to leave our answer in reduced fraction form. What do we notice about this triangle? It's missing a side. So how do we find that missing side? Pythagorean theorem. So a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Which of these is c, the hypotenuse? 34. Which means that 16, and we don't know, so we can call it x, are the legs. 16 squared is 256. 34 squared is 1,156. Subtract 256. X squared equals 900. Take the square root, and x equals 30. Alright, so we want to find the trig ratios from angle K. What is the first trig ratio? Sine. Sine from K, sinc, you're welcome, will be opposite of our hypotenuse. We forgot to label our sides. Which of these is the hypotenuse? And which of these is opposite? And then that means 30 is adjacent. So in SOHCAHTOA, so is SOH. They're both even. We want to reduce. So this reduces to 8 over 17. Cosine from K, cosc. SOHCAHTOA, how do we spell ka? C-A-H, good. 30 over 34. They're both even, so this reduces to 15 over 17. Last is tank, tangent from K equals the opposite, 16 over the adjacent 30, and then this reduces to 8 over 15. So, this is the answer. Here's what you're going to learn today. These are 3 equations that would help you solve for the same thing. What is missing in each of these equations? The angle. So any one of these, I'm going to teach you how to type it in your calculator, but any one of these you would get the measure of angle K. So that's what we're going to learn today. We will continue to review, though, with this next one. Solve for the missing side lengths. This also kind of warms us up for what we're doing today. None of the side lengths are labeled, so like none of them are x and y or a or b. So what we're going to have to do is label the length of PR and RQ. I'm just going to put a box around this and fill in the answer when we get it. Alright, so to find PR, what kind of side is it in comparison to the angle we were given? Opposite. So here is what we do when we solve this equation. I am going to call this side O as an opposite. You can call it X if you want, but either way, neither one of us is going to say X equals a number and then box it. We're going to figure out what the length is and then, put it in our answer, the length of PR. So we've got an opposite, and then what kind of side is 22? Hypotenuse. So which trig ratio are we going to use? Sine. Good. From 37 degrees equals the opposite, which we don't know. Again, I'm going to put O. You could put X if you want. Over the hypotenuse, which is 22. Do I need to flip this? I do not. 22 is on the bottom. Multiply by 22. The opposite equals 13.2. right, so the length of PR equals 13.2. Okay, so now we're going to find RQ. What kind of side is RQ in comparison to 37? Adjacent, so I'm going to call it A. And then we're still going to use the hypotenuse. You always want to use the side they gave you. So which trig ratio are we going to use here? Cosine from 37 equals the adjacent over the hypotenuse. Do I need to flip it? Nope, just multiply by 22. What is it? 17.6. So again, you'll want to say the length of RQ equals 17.6. So today's lesson is called Solve Right Triangles. Before you turn the page, what I want you to do is write at the top. Solving right triangles means finding all missing angles and all missing sides. So finding all missing angles and all missing sides. So finding all missing angles and all missing sides. So anytime you see solve the right triangle, you're finding three things because they're going to give you three things. So if this question, it didn't, but if this question said solve the right triangle, we would have solved for everything except for one piece of information. So it had two missing sides. What else did it have missing? An angle. Do you know enough about triangles and the angles inside of a triangle to find the measure of angle P? We do. What do you know about the three angles in a triangle? They add up to 180. So you know, you have 90 and 37, which is 123. Subtract that from 180. What's the measure of P? 57. Nope, 53. I'm sorry. I did some math in my head ahead of time. 90 plus 37 is 127. Subtract that from 180. It is 53. So if this question were one from this section, from 9.6, it would say solve the right triangle. We already know how to find the sides, and then you actually already know how to find the angle. Okay, so you know like 50% of the lesson already. The last bit of review that we're going to do is this. Determine which of the two acute angles has a sine of 0.4. So which of these angles are acute? Angle Q and angle R. So one of these has sine of 4.4. So I would just find sine of both of them and figure out which one equals 0.4. So sine is opposite over hypotenuse. What is opposite of Q? 3 square root of 21. And then the hypotenuse is 15. So just go ahead and type that in your calculator. Hit S to D. You get 0.9? Okay. So obviously by default it's R, but we're just going to check that it is. Sine of R would be opposite over hypotenuse. What is opposite of R? 6 over the hypotenuse. 15. What is that as a decimal? It's 0.4. So angle R is the answer. You did have it on the last test, and you will most likely have it on the next test. Okay, so let's talk about solving right triangles. Okay, I already showed you that you know how to solve one of the scenarios. To solve the right triangle means to find all the missing sides, all the missing angles. You can solve a right triangle with either scenario. This is the one we're talking about today. If you're given two side lengths, you have enough information to find every other piece in the triangle. And then if you're given a side and an angle, you have enough, which is what I showed you in that last, like the second example. Okay, so before we do any of that, let's talk about this. When we have two side lengths, I'm just going to use this. Here is a scenario you might have where you're given two side lengths and you can find everything else. How would you find the missing side? The Pythagorean theorem, so you know how to do that. Then after that, we're going to use trig ratios, okay, to find an angle. So let's say I wanted to find this bottom angle. Okay, here's like a little example. You would label the sides. What kind of side would be 3? This isn't on your notes, we're just talking. It would be opposite. What kind of side is 5? It would be the hypotenuse. So which trig ratio would we set up? Sine from the angle we don't know. Let's say it was an A, or an M. Like it would say the name of the angle, right? So sine from M would be the opposite 3 over the hypotenuse 5. What you learn on the next slide is how to find the measure of the angle. Okay, so what I want you to do is look at your calculator and locate the sine button. There's the sine button itself. Don't click it. Don't touch it yet, but just look at it. Okay. Above it, there's something written, most likely in a different color, right? And it looks like sine to the negative 1. This is where we're going to find what we need. Think about all of math when we have an equation. How do I undo addition? Subtraction. How do I undo division? Multiplication. How do I undo squaring? Take the square root. So when you want to undo sine, so if you look at this, it says sine of m equals, I want to get rid of sine. You have to use the inverse of sine. And what is above that sine to the negative 1? That is the inverse. Okay, so what would happen is you would hit the shift button. So your calculator is a little different. It might be, but it's like in the top left, either shift or alt or something. Choose a different calculator. Or do you have the same one? Okay. Yeah, you hit shift or second and then sine. And then what will pop up is sine to the negative 1. Here's why you would do this. I want to get rid of sine. I need to hit shift sine and have sine to the negative 1. What happens is the signs will cancel out. But what I do to one side, I got to do to the other. So I'd have to do sine to the negative 1 of this side. So what you're going to type in is sine to the negative 1 of 3 over 5. What is it? We can round to the 10th. 36.9 degrees. Or on your homework, I think it does say to the nearest whole degree. Either way, this is the answer. So what's going to happen is you're going to use that inverse. It's actually called arc sine, which is probably what your Algebra 2 teachers will call it. That's the official name. In here, we're just going to call it the inverse of sine because it's technically what it is. But what's going to happen is each of these sine, cosine, and tangent have an inverse. However, you only use that inverse button for angles, and I do need you to write it down. So you can write it in that top of that page too. You only use the inverse to find angles. You only use the inverse to find angles. You only use the inverse to find angles. Only use the inverse to find angles. And this is what you're highlighting. You only use the inverse to find angles. Okay, only use the inverse to find angles. Okay, this across the screen just says to find missing angles given the trig ratio, you would use the inverse. Okay, because you have a missing angle, you're going to use the inverse button. Okay, so we're going to look at what that looks like to us. It only works for angles, and the directions on your quizzes and tests and even homework will make it very obvious. It literally says let angle A, angle B, angle C be acute angles. So we're finding angles. Okay? Use a calculator to approximate the measures of angle A, angle B, angle C. So you're finding angles. Anytime you are finding angles, you are going to use the inverse button. So with this first one, to find the measure of angle A, we've got tangent of A equals 0.75. I want to get A by itself. I need to get rid of the tangent. How do I get rid of tangent? The inverse of tangent. So hit shift tangent of 0.75 and then hit enter. We, in this section, are rounding to the nearest tenth of a degree. 48.6, do we agree? What did I say? What did you say? Did you use tangent?
Oh, no, I have to use that.
Okay, what is it? 36.9 is correct. It's okay, we use it as a teachable moment. You gotta use tangent. This next one is sine of angle B equals 0.87, so we want to get rid of sine. English, You know what I'm saying. Get rid of sine. Use the inverse of sine. Shift sine of 0.87, and you get 60.5. Yeah. And then C, you have cosine of angle C. You want to get rid of cosine, so you need to use the inverse of cosine. Shift cosine of 0.15. 81.4 degrees. Good. Okay, so now we're going to apply it to a picture. So, here it says solve the right triangle. I still want you to write above it, find all sides and angles. Find all sides and angles. Okay, so first, before we even do anything, do I tell you now or later? All you're going to be asked to do on the homework, please don't work ahead of me. All you're going to be asked to do on the homework, it won't have these directions. It will literally say find the measure of angle E. And all you would do is find the measure of angle E. On your homework, we're just doing baby steps to working towards solving a right triangle. Okay, so right now I'm going to show you all of it. On the homework, you're going to find one thing at a time, and then that's it. Okay? We'll talk about when we get there too. So, on this one, solve the right triangle, round decimal answers to the nearest tenth. So we've got a couple things missing. What I'm going to do is just list them and then find them. So we need to find the length of DE. We need to find the measure of angle E. We need to find the measure of angle D. What I highly recommend is making sure I can see what your answer is, because if I can't, it's just wrong. So it's not necessarily honors as much as it is standard, write everything everywhere. So this is helpful for me. I could just boom, 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 check and see how you're doing. All right, so what do we want to find first? Yeah, we could find the hypotenuse DE. So how do we find the missing side if we know two of the sides? Yep, Pythagorean theorem. I know normally you show every single little bit of work, but what I would like for you to do, just to start saving some time if you can, we know A and B are 20 and 21. Just go ahead and type that whole thing into your calculator right now. 20 squared plus 21 squared. It's what? Yeah. Well, it'll be 841. Equals x squared. Take the square root. The square root of 841 is 29. So don't circle x because we made up x. The length of DE is 29. Boom. Now we find the measure of the angles. Okay, so I listed E first, so I'm going to use E. So you want to label the sides they gave you. Again, you don't know if you're right. This one was obviously a whole number, but sometimes you might round it. I would just use what they gave you because I know for sure that DF is 20 and EF is 21. So what kind of side is 20? Opposite. What kind of side is 21? So which trig ratio are we going to use? Tangent, good. Tangent from angle E equals the opposite, 20, over the adjacent, 21. So I want to get angle E by itself. So how do I get rid of tangent? Do the inverse. So shift tangent. Tangent's -1. Arctangent, if you will. We are all rounding to the nearest tenth. So what do we get? 43.6. So technically, you do know enough about the angles inside to just subtract to find D. But while you're still learning, I would use that as a way to check yourself, not a way to find the last piece. What I would do to find the last piece while you're still, getting confident in solving right triangles, I would mark things from angle D and set up another trig ratio. So from D, what kind of side is 21? Opposite, and what kind of side is 20? So which trig ratio are we going to use? Tangent from D equals the opposite, 21, over the adjacent 20. Shift tangent to find D, and then what do we get? I just can't hear you. Correct. Degrees. So now you could use the 180 to check yourself. What is 43.6 plus 46.4? Don't overthink it. It's 90. 90 plus the right angle, 90, makes 180. So these two should always add up to 90. All right, we're going to do this one more time, and then you'll work by yourself or with a partner, I don't care. We're going to find all the missing pieces because it still says solve the right triangle. So we're going to find the length of GJ. We're going to find the measure of angle G and the measure of angle H. So GJ is a missing side. I know two of the sides, so we are still going to use the Pythagorean theorem. This time is a little different. We are missing a leg and not a hypotenuse. Which of these numbers is the hypotenuse? 109. And 91 and x are the legs. What is 91 squared? 8,281 plus x squared. 109 squared is 11,881. Good. Subtract the 8281. X squared equals 3,600. Square root, and x equals 60. So again, I put the answer up here. So it's all in one place. GJ equals 60. Because we made up the letter x. There's no x in this picture. Now we'll find the angles. Which angle do we want to find first? G, okay. So from G, we're going to label the sides we were given. We already know this is the hypotenuse. What kind of side is 91? Opposite. So which trig ratio are we going to use? Sine, yeah. You're okay. Sine from G, sing, equals the opposite, 91, over the hypotenuse, 109. All right, so shift sine of 91 over 109, 56 point. 56.6. And then last, to find H, 109 is still the hypotenuse, but now what kind of side is 91? Adjacent. So which trig ratio are we going to use? Cosine. Good. Cosine from H equals adjacent over hypotenuse. To get the angle by itself, use the inverse of cosine of 91 over 109. What do we get? 33.4. Good. Ta-da! Okay. So the three steps kind of to finding the angles we're just to label the sides from the missing angle, so whatever angle you wanted to find, set up a trig ratio, and then use the inverse. Okay. This is the last thing we talk about today. It's at the bottom of your page. Just showing you the difference in the calculator work. You'll have to be able to do both on your test and know the difference because you're going to type in different things. So in this first one, go ahead and write that you are given an angle and you're missing a trig ratio. So you're given an angle, you're missing a trig ratio. Given an angle, you are missing a trig ratio. All right, so when we say you're given an angle, that's 33. You're missing a trig ratio, so when you type in this into your calculator, you're going to be given, you're going to find out what the trig ratio is. So just type in sine of 33. You know what the angle is, so you're not hitting shift. You just do sine of 33, and you will get a decimal. We can round 4 places. 5, 4 what? 4 places? 4, 4, 6? Okay. All right. Whereas here, we are missing an angle, and it's x, and you are given the trig ratio. Right? So you're finding an angle. So how do you find an angle in your calculator? Yeah, that shift button. So the measure of the angle equals shift sign, 0.333. We can round to the 10th because this is an angle. What is it? 19.5 degrees. Okay, you will need to make sure you know the difference whenever we take this quiz. You'll have one of each. Okay?